Hi everybody, and a really huge welcome to the 2022 International Development and Humanitarian Careers event. My name is Sophie Collar and I'm one of the careers consultants that works for the Careers Service. And I'm here today with my colleagues Caroline Hutchinson, Emma Ruth and Hayley Johnson. So you might not hear much from them, but they are going to be extremely busy behind the scenes, making sure that the event runs smoothly. So first of all, I'd just like to say a big thanks to them for all the work that's gone into making the event a reality today. I'm also joined by 10 speakers from the sector who I'll be introducing shortly and who have very kindly given up their time to be here today to talk to you all. I would like to extend a huge thank you to them because this event simply wouldn't be possible without them. They're here very much out of the kindness of their hearts. And some of them come back year after year as well, so they're really keen to lend their time and give their insights to you. So these are the event outcomes for today. So hopefully coming out of this event you will leave with an increased awareness of the sector and the huge variety of career paths within it. You'll get some tips, insights and advice on how to break into and to succeed within the sector. And of course, you'll get some experience of networking with professionals and with your peers as well. So you may be aware that at the Career Service, we encourage 3 behaviours, which are to be curious, be connected and be courageous. So you can be curious today by taking the opportunity to find out about the options within the sector. Be courageous in asking questions and initiating conversations, even if that means taking yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. Just bear in mind that opportunities like this really don't come along every day. And do connect with our professionals here today and with each other. Just remember that the students that you're meeting today as well might well be your future colleagues within the sector. So this is a really great place to start honing your networking skills. You could, for example, connect with each other on LinkedIn and perhaps try and think of ways to keep those career conversations going with each other after the event today as well. So I'll fully introduce our panellists after the keynote speech. However, to save the panellists from introducing themselves several times over, please can you make sure that you do familiarise yourselves with the information pack. If you registered for the event in advance before yesterday lunchtime, you will have received an information pack via email. However, don't worry if you've not got it to hand because my colleagues are going to post that in the chat so you'll be able to download it. But please do take the time to have a look at the profiles and that will help you to inform the context of the panelists' advice as well as help you think about what kinds of questions you might like to ask. If you can make sure that you do register your attendance at the event today, please. So even if you've registered in advance on Career Connect, that doesn't necessarily transpire that you've come to the event itself. So we only know that you've come here today if you follow the QR code here or if you use the bit.ly link. And if you can just say that you're at the International Development event, that would be perfect. And that enables us then to send you any follow-up resources and materials. So here's the schedule for today. Please do make sure that you keep your microphones on mute. And after my presentation and the keynote speech, I will briefly introduce the panelists before we move you into breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms, you're going to have a full hour to talk to the panelists on rotation. So we'll give you a 60-second warning before we take the panelists out of your breakout room. So hopefully they won't be mid-sentence. And then after the breakout rooms, we'll be returning to the main room here for the closing plenary and to ask the panelists for their top tips as well. So the opening and closing presentation and the keynote speech will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording after the event. However, the breakout rooms won't be recorded. So that everybody can make the most of the event, I'll be asking you to capture your thoughts and learning on Padlet, please. So the link's on the slide there and it will be going into the chat as well. You might just want to open that on a different window now so that you've got access to it. And that will just allow me to collate the learning coming out of today and send a summary around for everyone's benefit. And please note as well that when you go into the breakout rooms, there might be a slight delay before the panelists arrive. but all students here will be allocated to one breakout room at the beginning, and you'll be staying in that one breakout room. So please don't leave the room, and just bear with us if there are any minor delays, but hopefully it will go as smoothly as possible. So just in terms of some thoughts for today, we do hold this event every year, and myself and my colleagues began planning it actually several months ago, before the invasion of Ukraine had occurred. But now here today, we're less than 3 weeks into what the UN has called the fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II. And the global need for humanitarian workers has been thrown into such sharp relief. And I know that many of us are feeling very heightened to the concept of humanitarianism. So we just wanted to acknowledge that this is a difficult and upsetting time for many people. And just to remind you that there's a range of support available, and a link to that support can be found on the slide here and also within the chat. It's important to say that with this event, we always try to give a truly global picture of career opportunities, and also development careers often extend beyond fieldwork and operations to encompass policy, research, and economics roles as well. There's a growing need for humanitarian and development work the world over. And as well as grappling with environmental crises, the world is still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. But we do also here today have some panelists whose work goes a lot more under the radar. And we have panelists from areas where conflict has been raging for many years and where headlines might not be so prominent. So we do hope that you'll see today that the sector is vast and there are opportunities for you, no matter what your degree, no matter your skill set or your passion. It is a popular and competitive area to break into, so hopefully this event will equip you with some insights into the kinds of personal qualities and experiences that can help you to break into and progress within the sector. It's also a sector where there's an incredible amount of crossover, so even if there isn't someone here today that is exactly representing the role you're interested in yourself, there's a really good chance that they'll know somebody who does that role. So please do listen openly and treat any information that you receive today as a gift. Do think carefully about the questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, and we've listed some ideas and some examples in the information pack if you do need some inspiration. What I would like you to do just quite quickly now is if you can log onto Menti and pop in the code 4389955. So you can go to www.menti.com and put in the code 4389955. And if you could just let us know how confident you feel at the moment about your next career steps. So the scale is there. 1 would be you're not feeling very confident at all. 5 would be that you're feeling very confident, and 3 somewhere in the middle. And it's just really helpful for us to get an idea of where you're all up to with this at the moment, and we'll do this exercise again at the end of the event. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to fill that in. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of people feeling not very confident at all about their next steps or giving themselves a round 2 there. So hopefully you will find it helpful and insightful at the event today. And in the closing plenary as well, we'll be giving you some suggestions for how to move forward with your learning. Okay. So hopefully most of you have had a chance to gauge yourself on there. So thank you for doing that. I've also got a few more replies coming in. And okay, thanks for doing that. So now to introduce our keynote speaker. So we're incredibly grateful to Gareth for taking the time out of his schedule to join us today and share his thoughts, especially given this time of crisis. And I feel sure that you as students will feel the same way about that. So without further ado, it's my absolute honour to introduce Gareth Owen OBE, who is the Humanitarian Director for Save the Children UK. So over to you, Gareth.
Thank you so much. And firstly, what an honor it is to talk to you all today. So I really appreciate being invited. Talking to students at Manchester is genuinely one of my favorite things to do. So it's to take some time out from, frankly, from the crisis in Ukraine for a couple of hours to be with you is actually very good for my mental health and my well-being. So appreciate the opportunity. I can still remember being dropped off at Owens Park in October 1987 and the feeling of excitement and trepidation as I embarked on my university career. In those days, the city was known as Manchester for its wild music scene. And that gave us an awful lot of enjoyment, I can assure you, as young students. And Alex Ferguson was a relatively unknown manager in just his second season at Manchester United. So that's how long ago it was that I studied at Manchester. But I've stayed connected, and it's amazing to see how the university has thrived and flourished, and how humanitarianism has become a very central part of our relationship with Manchester. That's something I'm exceedingly proud of, actually. So I studied civil engineering in the Simon building. I'm not sure it's used for that anymore these days. But I didn't study very hard, if I'm honest. I spent most of my time enjoying myself and having an awful lot of fun in Manchester. And I scraped through with what we used to call a Desmond degree, a short for Desmond Tutu. I don't know if that phrase is still used. And I never set out to become a humanitarian practitioner at all. It happened later, really, by accident. There weren't any dedicated degree courses for humanitarian action when I was at Manchester. And in many ways, the sector was yet to professionalize into the kind of corporate industry it has somehow become. I use those terms quite advisedly. And if you want to know what I really think about all that, you might be interested in the chapter I wrote on Save the Children and the Rise of the Humanitarian Corporation, which was in a book called Amidst the Debris, Humanitarianism and the End of the Liberal Order, which we published last year in partnership with HCRI and others. And after graduating from Manchester, I started down the sort of conventional engineering path, civil engineering. But it took me less than a year to realize that I absolutely hated it. My father was a professor of tropical agriculture at Reading University. So development ran in the family in many ways. And so I went back to university at Southampton and did a master's degree in irrigation engineering, and ended up in Jamaica on a sugarcane plantation. So I couldn't have had a more neo-colonial start to my overseas career if I tried. After coming back from the Caribbean, I was lucky enough to get a volunteer posting with a beautiful organization called Concern Worldwide, an Irish agency. And this was in late 1992, when the crisis in Somalia was at its peak. So in January 1993, I found myself in Somalia, in a remote corner of the Bay Bakul region, just as the US Army was sending an invasion force under the codename Operation Restore Hope, one of the most notorious humanitarian interventions ever mounted in response to a terrible famine that saw 300,000 Somali souls lose their lives, and that was brought on by civil war. If you want to know more about any of that, you might be interested, and this is a shameless plug, I do apologize, for my new book, which is coming out on the 14th of June, which is called When the Music's Over, published by Repeater, and it's an account of my time in Somalia in 1993. But there's a very strange symmetry to the start of my aid career and current events today. But I had no idea that when I was starting out as a humanitarian, it was coinciding with the beginning of quite a unique period in international relations. It was the end of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and President George Bush Sr. saw himself, I suppose, as commander-in-chief of a new world order of Western hegemony. And in many ways, we in the West went on to proclaim victory for neo-capitalism in the years that ensued, and indeed declared that we had arrived at the end of history, to quote the book by Francis Fukushima. How wrong we were. I would go as far as to say that the arrogance, ignorance, and complacency of politicians in the West in dealing with a Russian president who, in the recent words of Neil Kinnock, has inhaled his own delusions, is certainly a contributing factor in the events unfolding in Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine is now settling into the worst kind of dynamic for children and their families. Intensive aerial bombardment of urban areas. That's why the Ukrainians are asking NATO for the no-fly zone. They want to remove the aerial threat of very devastating weapons dropped from the skies. Attacks on civilian infrastructure are causing huge human hardship as water and electricity plant becomes immobilized and housing, schools and hospitals are destroyed. In the background, the rapid spread of Omicron-driven COVID-19 in Ukraine, combined with growing numbers of injured people in need of emergency medical services, is putting additional pressure on the country's already stretched health system. The escalation of attacks are leaving hundreds of thousands of people without water, electricity, gas, and telecommunications. Meanwhile, violent clashes on the ground are increasing as fighting intensifies in the surroundings of the capital. And the safe passage of civilians and establishment of humanitarian corridors has proved thus far very difficult. The human consequence is obvious. The death toll is rising, as is the number of casualties, and refugee numbers now are approaching almost 3 million, people who fled to neighboring countries, and the total number of displaced persons within Ukraine is estimated at over 4 million. So the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine is urgent and growing, and very deeply troubling. Last week, I found myself describing to a group of Save the Children colleagues what it is like to be shelled during a siege. The horrific images flooding out of Ukraine are deeply triggering for people like me and take me back 30 years to another terrible civil war in another country. Then as now, the intent of indiscriminate shellfire in an urban setting was the same: to reap terror among trapped civilians and erode their will to resist. Then as now, the impulse to do something to alleviate the enormous human suffering was overwhelmingly strong. The terror never leaves you, but nor does the human will to survive break easily. My experience was in Angola in 1994, where I went after my year in Somalia. And I think the West is discovering that its New World Order hubris at the end of the Cold War was rather premature. The renowned American political scientist and international relations scholar, John Mearsheimer, is one of the best known critics of US interventionist foreign policy. In his now famous 2015 Chicago lecture, he lays the blame for the Ukrainian conflict squarely at the feet of NATO and EU expansionism. That said, his remarks have led to Eastern European commentators coining the expression West-splaining. They cite the region's historically unfortunate geographic location, which has rendered it the plaything of empires, as Ukraine's real tragedy. Mearsheimer's recent comments have also led students at Chicago University to describe him as a paid-up purveyor of Putinism and to demand that he change his views. For its part, Chicago University is resisting any such cancelling notions and defending his views as necessary free speech. But like most, I find it impossible to view events unfolding in Ukraine with dispassionate political realism. Human compassion and moral outrage are my driving forces. A sense of gross injustice and natural affinity might explain the giant wave of empathy rolling towards Ukraine from its Western neighbours, while from places further afield, it is perhaps an innate concern for the plight of the distant other that is driving the desire to help. I personally believe that such a sense of global human connection is a vital and necessary force for good in the world, and we should never fail to mobilise international solidarity for all the world's people in their hour of need. And there is much need indeed. Driven by conflict, climate change and COVID-19, the global humanitarian outlook for 2022 is stark. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 274 million people will require humanitarian assistance over the next year. And I suspect that number is before Ukraine conflict. Indeed, erratic weather patterns mean that the world is facing a hunger crisis on a huge scale in 2022, leaving many millions of children at grave risk of starvation. As a humanitarian practitioner who has spent the past 30 years on a search for truths about human nature, I have always despaired of all forms of human violence. And such violence comes in many forms. The brutal use of high explosives on civilians in Ukraine, or the slow agony of starvation in the Horn of Africa, Afghanistan and Yemen, that is also taking place right now. A great worry for all humanitarians is that the loss of access to Russian and Ukrainian grain supplies, together with the diversion of financial aid and political tension, may lead to huge loss of life in other parts of the world. Western concern for the urgency of Ukraine's misery must therefore be balanced with the scale and severity of suffering in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Ethiopia, in Somalia, in South Sudan, in Kenya, and elsewhere, if we are truly to live in a fair and peaceful world free of discrimination. But these days, I find myself spending more time in honest reflection on how I and others engaged with humanitarian endeavours should view the world. I find myself asking this question of today's aid system. To what extent have 3 decades of expansion and professionalisation with modern communication systems, managerial techniques, public scrutiny and oversight, risk management, bureaucratic compliance, safeguarding measures, anti-fraud, anti-terror legislation, and elaborate public relations, how much has that made us truly better at promoting humanity? And what of value may have been lost along the way? Are we still as bold, defiant, outspoken, and morally courageous as I imagined humanitarians to be when I arrived in Somalia 30 years ago? Today's technological connectedness is significant for the myriad virtual echo chambers it creates, where important debates rage about coloniality, racism, and white privilege in humanitarian aid. These subjects were not as front of mind to my generation of humanitarians. We tended to take it as granted that we had a right to intervene, and were generally less troubled by inconvenient notions of our own unconscious biases and complicities. Perhaps it was easier to get things done 30 years ago. There was a lot less bureaucratic red tape, but it is also true that we were less self-aware. As a young man, I was no Marxist or third worldist, but I knew it was a matter of historical fact that Western European nations had spent 500 years raping, pillaging, colonizing, and enslaving others with total impunity, and had used the ill-gotten proceeds to build the foundations of modern capitalism. I recognized that the West had made sure it maintained an economic stranglehold over former colonies, and was in no position to lecture anyone about morality or liberal values of democracy and human rights when it had denied these to so many for so long. I had been afforded and enjoyed all the luxuries of an upbringing in the capitalist liberal order, highly aware that I came from a European nation with a particularly unproud history in Africa. My desire to be a humanitarian aid worker was in part a personal stand against my home nation's many past ignominies. It's taken me a long time to come to terms with all of this. So here's a piece of advice for you. Examine deeply what is driving you. Have that inner dialogue and see what you discover. There is no right or wrong answer, just greater self-awareness to be achieved. And here's something else for you to consider. You must engage deeply with the politics of aid. Humanitarian action has always been about political action, often practiced with fluid pragmatism and a great deal of leadership courage. There seems to be a lot less of that to go around at present as the world recedes from notions of universal peace and international solidarity. The formal humanitarian system is a product of a liberal international rules-based order, seemingly in decline. It has become enmeshed in late modernity's complex and excessively technocratic web, and instrumentalized by the political forces of an anachronistic old world order, intent on retaining power and control. Does this bode ill for the future of humanitarianism, or will a new multipolar ecosystem emerge to achieve the ultimate goal of uniting humanity in tackling the planetary challenges ahead? We cannot really know the answer at present. Rather, we can only place our hope and faith in all of you. So here's another piece of advice. Beware falling into the technocratic, hyper-managerial mode of thinking that excessively dominates aid work today and is making the whole system of aid grind to a halt. How do I know how to say that? We have recently been surveying 50 CEOs of all the major international NGOs, and they all agree how stuck it has all become. You'll be able to read about that in a few weeks' time when we publish the final report. But the upshot of all this stuckness is two key things. Firstly, it is making it impossible for international solidarity to develop the right relationship with locally led humanitarian action. Secondly, operating from the periphery of the aid system in support of the action of others is an entirely different business model and leadership culture to the one that dominates aid today. So to be successful going forward, you will all have to become ecosystemic leaders, as Simon Weston describes it. And the key features of this are as follows. Firstly, it is about system ethics, beyond individual morality to acting ethically in the whole human realm. Secondly, it is about recognizing connectivity and interdependence. We live in a networked global society. Thirdly, it is about leadership spirit and celebrating the vitality of human connection. And finally, it is about your sense of belonging to the whole, to places and spaces virtual and real. And so to end, here's what I've learned after 30 years and what I truly believe in. At its core, humanitarian action is about hope and human connection. No matter where you may stand on the politics of liberal ideology and humanitarian intervention, if you are unwilling to address the suffering of the distant other, you are unwilling to contend with the idea that your global neighbor needs your help, and you have chosen to be separate in a shared world. Alternatively, if you are going to concern yourself with the suffering of others, then it is my view that the willingness to be in close proximity to that suffering is essential. You have to directly experience an element of the life of people affected, or you may lack empathy for what is actually going on, and you're not connecting to the politics of humanity in an authentic way. Humanitarian aid workers must not choose to distance themselves in the same way that foreign militaries can now sit in home bases and fly drones that still kill from the air in places like Somalia, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. Receding from direct human connection into such a virtual world is a terrifying prospect for me. The price you pay ultimately for a long career in humanitarian action is an enduringly heavy heart and a shrouding melancholia. You are acutely aware of the presence of enormous evil in the world and possessed by a stubborn unwillingness to ignore that evil. Your soul is heavy, you're weary with innumerable close encounters within humanity. But you're also imbued with endless hope. You are utterly inspired by the indomitable spirit of many people you have encountered in troubled places the world over, whose triumph over extreme adversity and fathomless courage simultaneously humble you and raise you to new heights of personal endeavor. I can think of no better or more privileged way to live a human life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gareth. That was incredibly thought-provoking and sobering and interesting. And I think it's just worth saying that if this were an in-person event, you would be getting a huge round of applause right now. But we will be capturing some comments from students towards the end of the event as well that we can share with you. So thank you very much for that. I'll just now introduce our speakers. So if you can just bear with me one moment. So here is a slide that contains the details of our speakers, who may now be putting their cameras on just to give you a quick wave. So along with Gareth, we have today Asan Abbasi, who is Head of Mission at Médecins Sans Frontières, Daniel Silva, who is a Senior Consultant at EcoSystemic UK, Emma Richardson, who is Student Success and Development Officer right here at University of Manchester. We have Hanel O, who is Operations Analyst for the Sustainable Development Vice Presidency Unit in the World Bank. Mike Bird, Operations Director from WEGO. We have Mubarak Ali, who is a funding coordinator for Oxfam in Somaliland. Rania Al-Raji, who is a human rights professional. And Shakira Mustafa, who is a program officer in Syria for Mines Advisory Group, MAG. And we also have here today Dr. Stephanie Rinaldi, who is a research program manager for HCRI here at the University of Manchester. So you will be asked to go into breakout rooms momentarily. So a pop-up will come up on your screen that will allow you to go into breakout rooms. So just follow that through and we'll see you back here in an hour. There is a help button in the breakout rooms if you need any help whilst you're in there, or you can leave the breakout rooms and come back into the main room if you have any questions. So yeah, please do enjoy your discussions and remember to be curious, connected and courageous. Thank you very much.
Great, I'll open the breakout rooms now.
Just waiting for everyone to come back from the breakout rooms and then we'll continue with the closing plenary. Hey everyone, welcome back. Just waiting for everyone to come back from the breakout rooms. Fabulous, welcome back everybody. So yeah, hopefully you found that really valuable and enjoyable and you got the opportunity to ask some questions. So in a moment, I'm just going to ask the panelists to see if they've got one top tip that they can share with us. And I'll start with Gareth, if that's okay. Gareth, if you'd like to share quite briefly if there are any tips that came out of the breakout rooms that you'd like to share with everyone.
I mean, my one top tip is if you truly believe in this line of work, then pursue it. Pursue it with vigor, pursue it with patience, and know that you will find your way. Make your contribution to the humanitarian world wherever you end up professionally. You don't have to be inside institutions to do that. And the more you build up your expertise, the more likely it is you will end up in an institution if you want to. So that's my one big tip. Don't give up hope.
Brilliant, thank you, Gareth. And Mike, do you want to go next?
I was just wondering what kind of institution Gareth ended up in.
Yeah, quite a few.
One thing is similar to what Gareth was saying, and I think I said it in one of the breakout rooms. There's always when you're doing interviews, the people doing the interview have got various boxes that they need to check, right? There are the essential attributes, and one of them is there's always something about motivation for the role. And if you want the job, you've got to demonstrate that you want the job and really, think yourself into it, because if you're not up for it, then that will come across. But I'd say the trick there is kind of understanding yourself and knowing what it is that you're looking for, and once you've got a clue about that, then you can see, well, here's a job that I can really think myself into, and then you're really going for it, and that will communicate itself.
Great advice, thanks Mike. And we're always trying to get that message out at the career service as well. Know yourself, understand yourself, have that self-awareness. Brilliant, thank you. Mubarak, would you like to give your top tip next?
Thank you. Similar to what the other two panelists said, I think the first is to really know your interests, your passion, why you really want to, join the sector, and what really motivates you to, consider a career in this sector. And then secondly, know the kind of skills that you will require to succeed in that sector, and whether you already have those skills, whether you want to develop those skills, and then to maybe identify good organizations that are maybe leading or working on the sectors that you are interested in, then yeah, maybe if you can have a run through the kind of advertisements that are out there and see what skills, what motivations are required, and how you can really improve your skill sets, motivation, understanding of the sector, and yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, really good advice. Thank you. Shakira, I don't know if you're able to give a tip or if you want me to skip past.
No, I could give one right now. Sorry, we're just about to take one. So my top tip is don't underestimate transferable skills. So even if you take a job that's not related to international development, take the bits that you need from all the different jobs that you may have, whether it's low-level admin, shop assistants, whatever. Those skills are still useful within international development. So just don't underestimate it, and don't be shy to take other jobs whilst you're working up to, build some more experience to get into international development.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Couldn't agree more. And if you need some help from the Career Service with identifying those transferable skills, then we can help with that as well. Asan, would you like to give us your top tip, please?
Yep. So I would like to say that to all the students that explore more about the humanitarian work. It is diverse, and it might be what you are looking for. And once you are into it, as other panelists says, keep applying, don't give up, you will succeed.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Daniel, if you'd like to go next. Are you there, Daniel? No, I think we may have lost Daniel. So Emma, would you like to give your top tip?
Yeah, and obviously working in volunteering, my top tip has to be volunteer. Use your passions. Don't just volunteer just to gain skills. It's not transactional in that way. Think about what makes you tick in terms of the areas that you want to make a difference in, and follow that passion and find volunteering opportunities, because there are so many out there that you can then hone your passions and kind of use them to drive you forward, but then you can develop your skills and your employability and make connections along the way. And don't just see it as a stepping stone either, see it as a journey alongside your humanitarian endeavours, whether that be the theories in the classroom or the work experience that you get. The volunteering will keep you grounded, I think, in the issues on the ground. So, and if you need help with it, then university volunteering team can help.
Wonderful, thank you, Emma. And Stephanie?
I suspected this would be the case from our conversations, but I was going to say the same as Shakira, that transferability shouldn't be underestimated. And just to elaborate a little bit, to also not underestimate your contributions to things. Like you can transfer the skills, and you can also be like really clear and strategic in the way that you frame your contributions to things that really represents like what you've actually done. But yeah, just to echo Shakira's mainly.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And then I think we've got Hanal. Are you here, Hanal?
Yep. I just want to say to everybody, be really confident and be open. You're really good enough, and you can be anything from now on. So if they don't hire you, you can also become your own boss, because this is the time of the history where you can actually start something online right off the bat. So I really recommend everybody to document your research journey, your humanitarian volunteer work, translate something if you speak other languages, or fundraise for some causes, because that becomes your portfolio and that becomes your proven record. So you don't really need to be hired by somebody, but you can hire yourself. So good luck, everybody.
Fantastic advice. Thank you, Hanal. And finally, Rania, would you like to give your top tip?
Sure, thank you. What I want to say is really to look at it beyond the career path. I don't think of humanitarianism as a profession, and I think that there's a lot of pressure for us to mold in, to take the shape of organizations. It's one of the most fascinating fields, but also addictively fascinating, but it's also a very harsh and ungrateful one. And I think it's very important to focus on yourself as an individual and to look at your career from the perspective of what do you want to change, what do you want to be as an individual, regardless of what organizations will push you into. Because in 20 times, you will find yourself with yourself and your personal life and a lot of challenges. So you need to make sure that you have gone where you wanted to be, and that you can then join something else or be outside of being a humanitarian only.
That's great. Thank you so much. And just thank you again to all of our panelists for giving up their time today. I will momentarily be asking you to just contribute any comments that you'd like to give via Mentimeter. Just before that, I've just got a couple of quick slides to run through. So revisiting the event outcomes. So hopefully you'll have come away now with an increased awareness of the sector and the variety of career paths within it. Hopefully you've all got some great tips and insights on breaking into and succeeding within the sector. And you'll all have honed some of your networking skills with professionals and hopefully with your peers as well. So going forward after the event, some advice we would give would be definitely grow your network and keep it going. So do connect with each other and with our panelists today. And please do take the opportunity after today as well to find out even more about the organisations that have been represented and the work that they do. You can build on what you've learned today by using our career pages. We've got lots of information on working in the international development sector there, which you can access through that hyperlink. And also, engage with the career service. There's a link there which my colleagues can pop in the chat as well. And that tells you everything that we've got going on and how to connect with us, how to make appointments, how to book onto events. And also how to look for opportunities. So some more information here about how to connect with us at the Career Service. So please don't be a stranger after today. Our social media handle is @UOM Careers, and you can follow us on social media or get in touch via Career Connect. And please don't forget as well that we offer a number of appointments which are listed on Career Connect. So they can include careers meetings, interview simulations, application appointments, and career planning with a disability or health concern. If we can just revisit Mentimeter now, it would just be really helpful to see how you're all feeling. So if you can just identify how confident you're feeling about your next steps after the event. Oh, brilliant, someone straight in at number 4 there, that's great. So just a reminder that 1 is if you're not feeling confident at all, 3 would be reasonably confident, and 5 would be very confident. So lots still saying number 4. And if you are still feeling at number 1, please do book in for a careers guidance meeting and we can help you plan strategies as well. Yeah. So I think a lot of students here are sort of moving up the scale, which is wonderful to see, and just kind of shows the direct impact that our panelists have really at these events. Okay, I'll let you carry on filling that in the background as well. And then if you can also move on to the next slide here, and this is your opportunity. So obviously it's a virtual event today and you're unable to talk to our panelists in person. The massive advantage of us doing this virtually is that we've been able to bring people in from all over the world. But this is your opportunity now on Mentimeter if you would like to let us know what you would like to say to our panelists. So the number is 4389955 at www.menti.com. And yeah, please just one word or a few words about what you would like to say to our panelists. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Mentimeter, the bigger the words are, the more people have said them. So yeah, getting a lot of thanks here, you know, inspiring comments and great insights. Students have loved the sessions, found it motivating. You're amazing. Great variety has given me hope. That's a lovely comment. and a big thank you there in the middle. So once we've got all of those words in, we will share those with the panelists. So do please continue to keep adding to those comments. Okay, and just finally, before we sign off, I think quite unusually we're finishing the event a little bit earlier today than usual. Just a note on equality, diversity and inclusion. So we do know at the Career Service that not all students have the same experience of accessing career support or recruitment processes. So it's just a reminder that we are here to support you however you identify, and we do have some information on our pages about support and initiatives that we can give. So please do check that out. And thank you very much for attending the event. A big thank you again to our speakers and panelists. Thank you to the students too. I hope you got a lot out of it. And yeah, you may feel free to leave whenever you're ready. So thank you very much.